Put him back in a minute. Oh, you hit go, Ted. I didn't even know. Look at you.
Sorry.
So see what happens when you've got two people at the controls, not one. So I'm Nate
We
Adams.
were late. That's not cool.
Welcome to the HVAC 2.0 show. Um, tonight we're going to be going through one of my first projects, our first projects. That was really, really painful, to be frank. Um, there was a lot of stuff to learn, but it came out well in the end. Um, so that's what we're going to do. Let me get the slides up here. So I made a mistake in naming this. I should have called it the Cape of Fear. Just like such an easy miss. Totally screwed that up. But oh well. Uh, this was a Cape Cod that was fairly complicated and fairly early into the Energy Smart Home Performance. It really pivot because I started as Energy Smart insulation and then turned to home performance and did these kind of advanced projects. This is where a lot of the 2.0 process formed, particularly the latter end of it. So this is not a project that if you're using the 2.0 process, you're going to do very often. This is quite rare, but you can at least see what it looks like. And I'll talk a lot about some of the painful things I learned in the middle of this one. So these are the different stages, and we'll be walking through these. So it starts with the comfort console. We use very similar process to what is in the software now. Then we did the comprehensive planning process, which that's the advanced piece for doing shell work, where there's a lot of stuff going on, particularly for difficult basket case houses, and this was one. Then you choose options, you get bids, you go execute, and then you commission the house, and then you learn what you can learn from it. And remember how I've talked about how good judgment comes from experience and experience that comes from poor judgment? Get ready for some poor judgment. So even knowing a reasonable amount, this house was pretty challenging. So here's some of the stuff that I learned. I learned the limits of insurance. That's a good story. We'll get there. How to install spray foam. So some little details that I didn't realize matter. Load calcs are way off for heating. This is the house that really drove that home for me. Super tight homes aren't required for good results. So if you do a decent job on the top and bottom of a house, that can oftentimes flip them. It flipped this. I sucked at project management. I'm still just okay, but I was really bad. And I also sucked at scoping. This job was done by a crew that was used to new construction piece rate, and that did not mix well. They were really difficult to work with at times. And then responsibly avoiding responsibility works. This is the first time I got to see that. And all of this ended up informing what are the 2.0 principles now, which is the process is sacred. There's a very specific order that you want to do things in, so you keep yourself out of trouble and you also get to work. You want to be the guide, not the hero. Think of a guide like an experienced hero. I mean, Yoda was cooler than Luke at the end of the day, but Luke had to go do the hard work. Responsibly avoid responsibility. Find the sweet spot. We'll talk about that. Do no harm, of course. This is basically like being a doctor for houses. And then learn by teaching. Those are the principles. So, and in the process, we've talked about this in past weeks. This is the short version of the process. Two questions. Are there comfort problems to solve? And is HVAC alone likely to solve the problem? This is one of those rare jobs where the HVAC alone is not likely to solve the problem and there are things to fix. So this is a CPP, comprehensive planning process. This is all that we did with the Energy Smart Home Performance practice. So this is not going to be normal, but we started by fixing the difficult stuff and then had to figure out how to scale back. And so now we can handle any lead, because what we found was when we screwed up something in here, we sold a piece of HVAC. So I wanted it to go here, which is a problem. To be a good guide, you need to not care about which path people take. And I cared, which wasn't good. And so that put me out of integrity on how I would talk to people about things. And I got to where I was good. When we shifted the process to what we have here, The first 7 comfort consults that I did after that, I sold every one a CPP, 100% closing. That wasn't good, actually, because 2 of those people absolutely should not have had them. I should have talked them out of it. But I was so excited that I talked them into it. So I was selling, and you don't want to sell, you want to offer. Of those, if people bought a CPP, 92% did projects. I think that's an above average closing ratio. What do you all think?
It's all right.
All right. Yeah. You're leaving 8% on the table, dude. What the hell? Give it 110%. So we'll run through the stages of this thing now. That was kind of the intro. So comfort consult, took a look at the house. We had to figure out what the heck was wrong with it and what to do. So for starters, this is a house that has knee wall attics. And this is not that house. This is my old house. This is one of the bedrooms. So if you have knee wall attics, this is a knee wall here, which basically means that there is an attic on the other side of it. And then you get sloped ceilings, and then there's either a small or a decent sized attic up top, depending how deep the house is. So this is what this house had a lot of. Here's what they look like in construction. So you've got your top plate for the first floor. You have your rafters coming up. You got a 45-degree top plate on this wall. And then you got the slope ceiling, and then it goes up and over. So we had to deal with this, and I'll get into exactly how we did. This also had the fun twist of knob and tube wiring. Hope that you don't cross this too often. This sucks when you're trying to insulate. Thankfully, none of it was up here, so we could actually insulate in this. By the way, note this insulation. This is the roof deck. This is called a hot roof. This is how these things tended to get insulated. The capes are super common for the 40s and 50s in the Midwest in particular. They probably are elsewhere, but I haven't paid that much attention. It was pretty leaky to begin with, a 5800 blower door. This is not good. And we should jump briefly into what does a blower door reading mean. We think about a leakage to square footage ratio. So 1-to-1 is where houses tend to start to work. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house and a 2,000 blower door, that's a 1-to-1. You can probably control that house with HVAC alone. This house is 5,800 blower door to a 2,400 square foot. So that's 2.4-to-1. That is not very good. So that's very challenging to make work. So you could HVAC the problem away, but I mean, like, you have to hit it hard, and you're going to need more ductwork than what any house is going to have. So making this house comfortable without shell upgrades is unlikely.
And this house had really the right size equipment once it was fixed anyway, right?
Yep. Yeah. This had a 60,000 BTU 2-stage furnace put in by Stu Unsdorfer of Central Heating and Cooling, who's a longtime friend and now retired. He sold his company. And
he was known for putting in really small equipment that being aggressive on his sizing.
Yeah, if a house had an 80, he'd put in a 60 and guarantee that it would work, and he'd change it out if it didn't. And he did many units, and he said there was one that he ever changed back out. So he was downsizing 20,000 BTUs every time and got away with it like 99.9% of the time. So that gives you an idea of how much space there is. And this house shouldn't have had a 60, frankly, not in the state that it was in.
It worked so long as it ran.
Yeah, but we'll get to one of his goals in a little bit. But these pictures here were fun to me because I had just gotten a FLIR 1. This is one of the first jobs I got to use it on. And this was one where you actually snapped it. It was a phone case. So it actually had a battery that was worth a damn. The newer FLIR 1s have fairly small batteries, and I feel like I'm on Final Jeopardy waiting for it to count down. Be using it. I'm watching it go 99, 98, 97. Like, I hope I can scan this house before I'm out of battery. But
that's just to incentivize you work faster. That's all that is.
Yeah. But so these are half sales tool and then a half diagnostics. So you want to have it work long enough to show the homeowner what's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to scare them into buying something, right? That's how you're supposed to use it.
Move fast. Yeah, there you go. 59-minute air. Here we come.
Maybe that's what's being used to see air leakage, what I've been hearing about. Is that what it is? Maybe that's what I've missed.
Maybe.
That's
Maybe.
it.
There you go. Not these ones, though. I'd never seen throw patterns before. This is kind of an old school vent on the floor, and you can see it's throwing it side to side, and this one's thrown out and then up. I'd never seen throw patterns. I thought it was interesting. These are like $300. There's a whole bunch of uses for them, but they work best with the blower door. If you try to interpret a house without a blower door running, there's a lot of room for error. And actually, so one of the things on this house wasn't a huge goal, but it had ice dams, which I showed this to Tanner the other day. He's like, what the hell are ice dams? And it's when you have snow on the roof long enough that it melts and then it refreezes in the gutter, then you can have issues. That's super common, and it was particularly common then. We haven't had a winter that has created ice dams in like 5-8 years now. It just hasn't been a problem, but it was definitely an issue as I was getting rolling with this here. So you can see there's icicles coming out, and that's caused. This is a summertime photo. Actually, I think this was September, and you can see the top plate here is leaky. This is attic heat coming down through the top of the wall, and anytime you scan a house when the attic is warm, you're going to see stuff like this. Like top plates are pretty much never sealed. You concur, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I don't think I've ever seen a house with decent top plates. So like you can assume it's going to be bad. Knee walls really suck too. So this is the bottom of a knee wall. And then these are the joists of the first floor ceiling right below it, if that makes sense. And then I stuck the camera down in under here. You are looking through the ceiling of the first floor and the floor of the second floor. So outdoor temperature air is getting right into this space. That adds a crap ton of heat load. So routinely, we could get 40 to 60% reductions in air leakage and capes from just dealing with the knee wall attics, just the top of the house, not even getting to the walls or the bottom. So these are really, really leaky here. This is the equipment that it had, and actually I think it still has this 2-stage 60K, and then a natural draft water heater. I was nervous about this, but this is at least a halfway decent install. You know, it's not a true bad, but it's at least a little wider than 12 inches. So a decent install from Stu. But I was pretty nervous about the natural draft water heater. When you start air sealing homes, particularly the basements, the odds are about 50-50 that this will backdraft. So it might be okay on combustion safety testing before, but it's not going to be afterwards, about half the time. And so we were on the edge with budget. So I was hoping we didn't have to replace this because it wasn't that old. This is the old Comfort Consult interview form. And Ted, you created this in like 2008, I think. And then I ran this for years. So I only started using something else. I think it was summer of 19 when the software started working. There's just a bunch of stuff in here that you're asking them questions like how long are you going to live here? What year was it built? How many square feet? How many people live here? All this stuff. And so Adam said he was planning on retiring here, and then they sold the thing 2 years later. Oops. But when somebody tells you they're going to live someplace for a long time, they usually do. And so now this is in the software, and you can actually try it out for free. You just get an account at app.hvac20.com. But every question in here, this is a pretty long questionnaire. It's in there because either someone we know got bit or we got bit by not asking it. So this is all CYA, responsibly avoiding responsibility with all those questions. So we have Johnny, the bull in the China shop tonight. So we'll hear some stories from him, but I'm sure he's asked some of these questions that got some surprising answers. This hopefully is familiar at this point. The Comfort Consult, it's all about the client, and really the whole system is about it. It's how do we solve the problems that each client wants to be solved in the best way for them. It's choose their own adventure as you go. So the goals of Adam and Rena were they got freaked out in Hurricane Sandy, and the power went out for 8 hours, and the temperature dropped 20 degrees. That's precipitous. And it wasn't that cold outside. It was about freezing. So it's not like this is 5 or 10 degrees. Like freezing in Cleveland is 3 months a year. So like that's not a really cold time. So he was nervous about pipes freezing, and the whole house was uncomfortable. There were hot and cold spots everywhere. The basement was too hot or too cold, depending on the season. The second floor was too hot or too cold, depending on the season. The family room was too cold. And then they had ice dams. So there was a lot of stuff going on in this house. Like I showed earlier, it's quite leaky and it was pretty poorly insulated. And we had a $20,000 budget, which it's actually good that he did this then, because this is like at least 30 grand now, what we did. And I want to touch on something. This is an energy audit from the gas company. Most energy audits are BS, and I'm not talking building science. It's amazing how bad the numbers can be and the things that we hear. Like, we frequently hear where energy savings predictions are more than what the gas usage is. I bought $1,500 in gas last year and they promised I'd save $2,000. So can I get a check? So let's look at this. And what mystifies me is this is the gas company. So they have access to the actual usage and the actual costs. So they said that it costs $2,300 a year, and improved, it would be $750 a year in savings from building Shell. Let's dive into that a little bit. The actual cost of the gas that Adam bought in this year is about $1,100 versus $2,300. You see a mismatch there? You can make paybacks look really good if you pump up the before numbers. Those are rookie numbers. You got to pump those up. So 750 a year predicted savings, just some really quick math on it. $1,100 a year, $100 a year of that or so is water heat. $300 a year at the time was for the meter fee. It was about $25 a month, which leaves about $700 a year for saving for actual heating in that house. Remember, this is a leaky house with a fairly high load. So they promised $750 in savings on $700 of heating usage.
It's almost like they're lying.
Almost,
I mean,
but we don't use that word here.
I'm sure they're not. That just
because
seems
they
crazy.
failed high school math.
They good at math.
Oh, they're not lying. They're just stupid. That's all it is.
That seems like what it mostly is.
Yeah. So this was that's a frustrating thing to learn, but we saw that a lot. And also the audits typically didn't lead to action. A lot of our clients came to us and had an audit, but were confused and didn't move forward. And we helped remove the confusion, give them a path forward, and got the project going. So next up is a CPP. This is where we get into advanced modeling and also a bunch of planning, project planning. But first, we need to do a little bit of a fat Cheeto. So here's load calcs as you see them.
Look, let me show you how I calculate it. See this piece of paper here?
Mm-hmm.
See that house?
Yeah.
Well, see, it fitting in there. It's easily that's a 4-ton.
Oh.
Yeah. All right.
Is that pretty accurate?
Oh, yeah. We use it all the time. All the time. 4-ton.
Okay.
Yeah. You good to go?
Hmm.
Look.
Got to figure out how to actually get it to move forward. There we go. Trent is doing some good work with those, man. Those videos are hilarious. He puts that wig on, goes to the
An awesome belch right in the beginning. Look.
They're pretty fantastic.
Just needs a similar one of him like up in an attic going, actually, you don't need a blower door test. We just look at it real good. And if you look at it real hard, you can see those CFMs. They just run everywhere.
You just got to have the right eye. So we did a very careful load calc on this and trued it to energy use. Now, this is not ManJ, to be clear. This is a program called Treat, which is common in New York, which is where Ted lives, and what he learned on, and then his partner who did the modeling learned on. But this came in at 67,000 heating, 27 cooling. So the 67 heating right here, see the 67,481. A little bit below this, I didn't include in the screenshot, but it says this is slightly conservative compared to ManJ. So, maybe ManJ would be 64 or something like that. But we loved seeing heat system is undersized and does not meet the required load. This was the post project, by the way. And this program also, we called this tight loads. I don't know what the heck you call it, but it's block loads. So if you add up 28 and 15, you get 43,000, which has the fudge factors dialed out of it. But we're going to get to what the actual load is later, and it was neither one of those. These are the packages that we put together. So 3 different packages from 17 to 38,000. Package 1 is basically what he ended up doing. So we spray foamed the roof. We put cellulose up top. We did some air sealing work. We added a bath fan and encapsulated the crawl. And then I put an Ecobee in and screwed that up. I got to learn how to blow a fuse. That was fun. And not have any idea what the hell I was doing. Scared the whole time as I'm doing the project. So basically we did this top one, and then I charged $3,000 for project management, which was nowhere near enough, really. And what we were trying to figure out, what we're always trying to figure out, is where's the sweet spot where doing more is not necessarily the best way to spend money. So we have high odds of success without spending more than we have to. This project was actually not in the sweet spot. This was the budget one, which was a little bit below. So it's about here. So it's pretty good odds it's going to work. We're over 80%, but we don't know for sure. There's other things suggested. And while this job was $20,000 here, it would be over 30 at this point. So then we had to choose options. So we put all these plans together and go and present. And then we walk through stuff. So here's what we did on this house. We added a ground to the outlets in the front of the house because it was just 2 wires. We did hybrid knee wall insulation, which is foaming the knee wall attics and cellulose in the top attic. I'll show what that looks like. We did a crawl space encapsulation. We dense packed the front wall and the garage walls. And then we replaced the bath fan upstairs and vented it out. Then we get to execution. So this I'd never seen before. This is an electrician. These guys were awesome to work with. So they cut this little strip out and drilled through so they could add that ground wire, and then wired it in and then put the strip back and mudded it. It's pretty cool to see. And we were dense packing this anyway, so we knew that we had the paint and drywall to do. Here is just what I was showing before, the knee wall attics. But this is what we ended up doing. So this is what we call the hybrid method. So this is closed cell foam here from the top plate of the first floor up to the top of the knee wall. And then this next section, the slope ceiling, it can either be blown insulation or spray foam, depends on a bunch of factors. And then the top is blown insulation. So that's what we did on this one. Sometimes you'll spray the whole thing. Sometimes you'll do old school. There's a bunch of things. And I'm about to put out an air sealing course that is super practical. And this is one of the slides out of it. So here's what the top attic looked like. This is not the flattest cellulose job in the world, so somebody's going to give me a hard time, I'm sure. But then we also foamed this bath fan line coming up here. And then before we cellulosed, you can see where we tackled the top plate of the gable wall over here. So this got foamed to stop leakage. And this was something I didn't put in the scope. There was a bunch of stuff that I learned, like my scopes were not anywhere near tight enough on this. And these guys were working piece rate, and it was understandably so. Like, I can't be mad at them. I was just being mad at myself, but man, I needed to do better scoping, and I did after this. So this is what it looks like spraying in the knee wall areas. And then this is my friend Walter Money. Like there were 2 crews here working simultaneously. And then I was also trying to get some tasks done, and I was over my head. I was scared. Like, I remember holding this up and my arm was shaking as I was taking this picture. I was really scared just this whole time. I'd leave in the morning scared. I'd work the job scared. I'd go home and think, oh God, I hope this doesn't get any worse. So Walter is a friend of mine. He's an energy auditor and super nice, super smart guy. And he came over and gave me a hand. This is where he taught me how to do the measurement with an exhaust fan flow meter. So this was his that he brought along, and I got one a little bit after. So this fan flowed 72, which out of 80 is actually really, really good. That's about as good as you get usually. Here is what the roof deck looked like in infrared before spray foam. And here's what it looked like after spray foam. And note that this is not great right here. So I had never used an infrared camera for one, and I hadn't done spray foam like this too. I'd never done a roof deck. I'd done air sealing on the top of a second floor, but I'd never done a roof deck. So there was so much stuff to learn on this. I was so over my head this whole time. It's like, oh God, I hope I don't screw this too bad.
Just got to fake it till you make it.
Yep. I did, but I'll show you where I gave my whole feedback in a minute. That was fun. So here it is getting sprayed, and then you use a little stab tool that measures how much it is. It's not going to be easy to see, but this is 3.5 inches. Around 2.5 inches, you stop nearly 90% of heat transfer. So we want to make sure that there's at least 2.5, and they're allowed plus or minus an inch. So we spec 3.5 on roof decks. And this does a remarkable job. I did a bit more on our house in Ohio because it was just time and material. I did 4.5 there, but like going to like 8 inches of closed cell, it's just silly when you look at the numbers. We also dense packed the front wall. So here it is zip walled off. And then we drilled the holes and did that. Now, bad part of piece rate is cleanup is not part of it. I spent 2 days after the job cleaning everything up. They were out of town for a week. And there was dust everywhere from blowing cellulose in there. And then this here was, again, like a scope thing that I missed. This should have gotten foamed, but this is a supply coming out the wall here. So I wanted to reduce the leakage. So this is just single part foam, nothing fancy. Here's the crawl space encapsulation. You can see the wall is getting sprayed. There's me crawling around down there. And when we were done with all this work, we came down from a 5,800 to a 3,050 blower door. So pretty good leakage reduction, pushing 50%.
I noticed the fiberglass in the crawl space was upside down. Vapor barrier at the bottom.
Yeah, it's funny. It doesn't matter. It's going to rot either way. This is a horrible assembly. It doesn't matter what you do. Vented crawl spaces are stupid, with rare exceptions. Tanner, you're going to say something. I see you coming off mute.
I was just trying to think of what's the best phrase to describe how stupid someone has to be to think a vented crawl space works in a humid climate or a green grass climate. But I couldn't think of anything creative enough to really drive home the fact that you just have to be a complete and utter moron, because us who actually have to go in those crawl spaces hate you.
That's just the way it's always been done.
They are just nasty. They're always nasty. This house had a dirt crawl. At least Ken, you came and put the system in. I was just your tag along, and at least we had a vapor barrier and stuff down there, so it wasn't bad anymore. But man, when we first moved here, it was bad, and it rotted a bunch of stuff out underneath this house. This house has a lot of moisture issues.
Hey Nate, what year did you do this project?
2014. So this is almost 10 years ago. Did this September 14. So anyway, 5,800 to 3,050. We got this down to 1.3 to 1. And I'm like, I don't know if this is good enough. So I had been noticing for years that if you got to around 1 to 1, houses started to work. And that's also where through BPI standards, they start to look for mechanical ventilation. That's 0.35 ACH natural, works out to right about 1 to 1 ratio. So I kept noticing that in these audit reports when I got them. It would be a 2,000 square foot house, and 0.35 would be about 2,000. And so I just started noticing that, and also that the houses started to come to heel when you got them there. So I didn't know if this would be good enough. So here's an artsy shot of me taking a picture in a piece of the client's car's mirror, which I backed this out of their garage so we could dense pack the garage walls, and backed out so far, I took the mirror off on the box truck that was sitting outside. Don't do that. That was $3,000. I got to give my whole fee back. So I'm sitting there scared, afraid that I'm going to do something wrong. And then I do this. So I was definitely attracting the wrong things. That sucked. I got to do 2 weeks of work for free. Learned a lot. I mean, they say either you make money or you learn. This was definitely I learned. So commissioning. I was nervous that this was going to backdraft. So this is a simple way of doing backdrafting testing. Actually, you can't buy these anymore. It's called a wizard stick. It looks like a bong, but like I joke, I'm not that fun. Just came back from Vegas. I could have been fun. That whole town smelled like weed. Here's a video of me testing. So I turned the dryer on, and the bath fan on, and then the air handler on, which is taking the house as negative as you can. And then I went to see if it would work. They're actually allowed to spill for a minute according to standards. But you can see what happened. This is right after I turned it on. Well, this makes me happy. I tightened this house up. I want to make sure that it did okay under worst case draft. Do just fine. So you can see it visually that it's working. That'll make Jim Davis happy. Well,
And if you don't want to buy one of those, just bring your friend that vapes and just be like, all right, fruitcake, go over there and fog up that corner over there.
I hadn't thought about it. A vape is actually perfect.
So all you vapors out there, just know you've got a really good place in the air sealing business.
You do. Or, well, combustion safety testing. It's surprising how many fail draft tests. So then setting other things up, I had to learn how to do some other things. I hadn't set up many EchoBees before. So Ted had been telling me about these for a long time for runtime tracking, which we're going to look at. And so this was a stage 2 or 2-stage furnace. So I turned on reverse staging, which means it fires low stage first and only goes to high if it stays in low for long enough that it can't heat it. And then this is the first pass. This is very early Nate picking for me, where I'd put spray paint on the low spots when I was looking with infrared. And then I'd come back and put a bead on the low spots. So I did more on top of this, but you can get an idea of what I did. Here's another spot. See this hole in here? When you're spraying heavy, it's pretty often where you get some holes. And these guys, they didn't care that much. So there's the contractor was and is a friend of mine, but his crew was not really, they didn't care that much that day. So there were some various holes like this, which I filled in. And you can see all this in infrared. And these can really matter. These can be big condensation points, because in the wintertime, you can have humid air in the house touching this, and then it can actually create basically a stream of water. I've heard some pretty crazy stories where little wormholes in spray foam have really screwed stuff up. And then we got to learn, so here's the EchoBee charts. So blue is the air conditioner being on. This is a 3-ton single stage. And design in Cleveland is 89. You can see right here it was 93.
We should probably mention something about the spray foam. That's closed cell, but if it's open cell and you don't have it thick enough so it creates a condensation point, that open cell is going to get wet.
Yep.
And so you're going to create a, what do you call it? A flywheel effect, Nate?
Yeah, well, it definitely can be. It can just get wet and it never dries out, and then all kinds of bad things happen.
So it all gets cold, and it gets colder and becomes more and more of a condensation point, grows. Yeah,
it can rot the roof deck. Yeah, we used to think that open cell was okay in southern climates, but the more we're learning now, you can use it, but be cautious. But closed cell is a pretty good product as long as it's applied well. So anyway, this is a design day, and look, this unit ran for like 4 or 5 hours. That's all it took. This is oversized by a pretty good margin. So we came up with a 27 load, but it's not even that. So real heat load turned out to be about 30,000 BTUs per hour, and I'll show this in a second. But note that this light pink here, this is low stage, and then the red is high. So, and you can also see up here, this green, this is outdoor, this is set point here. Now I'm saying that wrong. The red is the set point. The green is the indoor temperature. Black is outdoor temp. And this is nice. They used to have outdoor humidity as well. Or actually this is indoor humidity, but they used to do that all together. Now humidity's on a separate screen. So when it kicks to high stage here, note that he turned the thermostat up. But the key thing to look at is right here. So this is a 60K 2-stage furnace. Low stage is 38,000. Hey, Johnny. You put yourself back on mute, buddy. So low stage is 38,000. And remember, Man-J or equivalent was 67. The heat load came in at 67. Design is 5 degrees in Cleveland. Look at this right here. We're right in the 5-degree range. The equipment shut off. So we know that the load's less than 38. So we think the load is right in the 30 ballpark, or maybe a little bit over 30. So this this house is a 3-ton heat pump. 2,400 square foot, 1957 Cape Cod in Cleveland. That's actually the appropriate piece of equipment for this, which is pretty wild.
And it's probably a good idea to mention that looking at this data and doing this, you can do that right now with pretty much any of the Ecobee thermostats that people have. And it's always been a funny thing to me of everyone loves to get up on a platform and talk about how you need to do a proper load calculation and all this and that. And the argument for it is always, well, you know, just because you've always done a thing and you've never had complaints doesn't mean that it's right. So you need to make sure that you're right. And then they'll just turn around and tell you, okay, do this load calculation, but you don't actually have to verify it. And we've never had any problems. And so they just repeat the same thing that they just demonize people of doing. And so it's a really good idea when you actually start looking at data and verifying your load calculations, because if you've done load calcs for 30 years and you've never verified one, you honestly have no clue if you're right.
You don't, it's a pain in the butt, but I mean, the more feedback loops you can find, the better. That's actually what we're going to end on tonight, is just look for feedback loops. And if you have a basic system on your house right now, buy an Ecobee, put it on. Wait for the summer on the design day and see what your runtime is. And then when it comes to winter, wait for a cold day and see what the runtime is. That is your real world load calc. That's no bullshit. That just is. That is your load. So it's very important to just kind of be aware of that. Now, in this case, I love this. They went out of town for a couple days, and Adam texted me and said, I just turned it down 10 degrees. Let me know how long it takes. So he went from a 20-degree drop in 8 hours to, you can look at this, and it's a 10-degree drop from 70 to 60 in 26 hours. And by the way, the right-sized side of things, it took 48 hours to recover those 20 degrees. So that was pretty aggressively sized for that house. I think the temperature dropped. Like that was Hurricane Sandy was crazy. I mean, we all had wild experiences. I drove back actually right through here to see my daughter's last ultrasound. That was a crazy drive. Got stuck in Charlotte and had to drive up to Cleveland through the night. So anyway, this made Adam super happy because this really freaked him out that the house dropped that fast. He was really worried about it freezing or bad things happening. There's lots of frozen pipes that happen in the cold snaps in Cleveland. Now, Ted had been telling me about how oil guys, they knew somehow how to go to the house and fill up the oil tank, but not put 50 gallons in, but put in 100 or 150 or 200 gallons. But they didn't wait so long that the tank was empty. So they somehow had some math, and using that thought, I went and got, this is a messy spreadsheet, but I wasn't doing this to show anyone. I was doing this for me to learn. I got the data from his gas bills that show how many days are in a billing cycle, how many therms, or actually this is MCFs, so this is 240 therms, the usage per day, and then how many heating degree days were in there. And so basically any month that had fairly high heating degree days, particularly over 1,000, this was a pretty cold winter, you can see that the usage per heating degree day was 23 to 25, 22 to 25 in that range. And after we did the project, we dropped to 12 or 13. So I could see in a month what was going on with that house. So the very first month we got this one in November, and it wasn't even really that cold yet. And I saw a 47% drop. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if that'll hold true. And this method, by the way, this is FAFO. Like, nobody really taught me how to do this. I'm just like, I've got these numbers. Can I do anything with it? That's where this was. And so much of this stuff is, you actually really want a novice to try stuff because they don't know what you can't do. So they just go do it. It's like the bumblebee. Nobody told the bumblebee they couldn't fly because by physics, they're not supposed to be able to. But nobody told the bumblebee. So sometimes having a novice go do stupid stuff will find new things that nobody else had figured out before because they weren't aware of the common things. Oh, I see Michael M asking, are there other thermostats to track usage? Well, it's not usage, it's runtime. And there's not many.
Prestige IAQ has data collection.
But
That's
don't
what
you
I
have
had
to,
in my house before
you have
I
to plug
changed
a USB into it to get it, or can you get it online
Yes,
now?
you had to download.
Okay, so you have to be physically on site to get it.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, knock yourself out, or you can get an Ecobee.
Yeah.
It kind of sort of does it, but like I have a American Standard 824 here, and the 1050s do it. It'll show you how many hours per day of runtime there are, so that's something. But that's not exactly what you want because you want to see it shut off. You're going to miss that shutting off when it's at design, and
You want to
that's
see what
you
time
want.
it does.
Yeah, what time, what the outdoor temperature is, how long it
Yes.
shuts off. Like, these are the things that you want to understand. And so it just is. So improvement package 1, we modeled very carefully, far more carefully than you're really going to see anywhere else. And we came up with $350 a year predicted annual savings. Actual turned out to be $275, primarily because gas savings went down. So we were within about 10% of predictions is what it worked out to be. But this is not a good money game. He spent 20 grand to save $275, and then he sold the house and he didn't get any of the money back. So this is a problem until you can see that houses are higher performance versus others. It doesn't really have any market value, but it did work out to be a 45% reduction in heating usage. This was the largest usage reduction that we saw in the projects that we did. So this is heroic to do this. So if somebody's promising 50% reduction of HVAC costs, they're probably full of it, or at least I want to see their numbers, because it's not an easy bar to hit.
Yeah, well, how many people that try to sell off of energy savings do they actually have real data? How many of those people actually looked at run times of equipment? The answer is probably 0 of them.
Right? It's project data trumps everything. It just does. So, I mean, it's important to do the design. It's important to understand the principles behind it and to go through all of that stuff. But if you don't verify the design with actual operations, you don't know if what you did worked.
The feedback loop of seeing where your shot lands and then adjusting your scope a little bit to the left or the right, and understanding what happens with windage. All of those things are what are going to help you keep hitting the bullseye.
Yeah, that's how you get good. Or I don't even know if you have to hit the bullseye, but at least we can hit the barn.
I mean, you can either just sit and think about it all day long, or you can actually go do it and see what happens.
FAFO, baby.
Yeah.
Like, that's so much of what we figured out, and so many things, like the whole reheat dehumidification thing. That shouldn't have freaking worked. I had no idea, but Paul Schultz had just put $40,000 into this project, and we added another $3,000 on for the ERV, and then we couldn't control humidity. And I had read somewhere about the idea of reheat and heard somewhere that reheat existed in that thermostat, and then had to spend like a week and a half of trying to figure out how the hell do I turn it on? I called the distributor, and they're like, "What's reheat?" I'm like, "Well, you suck. It's not in the book. Like, how do you do this?" And we turn it on, and this was pre-energy monitors, but there was energy monitoring on the thermostat, which I still love to have because you can verify what's going on. But that was FAFO. And it
was Brian that had
Brian Orr. Yeah, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't turn it on. I turned it on the deep settings and the installer settings, but you had to turn on overcool to dehumidify in the consumer side. So if you didn't have both on, it wouldn't turn on. And that was a problem. So yeah.
How did Brian know that kind of an obscure thing, I wonder?
Brian knows lots of obscure things. He's got a lot of detail in his mind, and he
Hey,
sells
Jeff,
Carrier.
That's something you knew?
What was that?
Did you know how to set
Reheat in the Carrier, the Carrier lines. Yeah. Yep.
how did you find out?
FAFO.
Oh,
I mean, again, you get into it, you start reading the manual, you play around with it, and you see what it does, and then you get the data, you collect it, and realize, hey, this shit works.
Yep.
But again, get the fire extinguisher out, guys. You have to put some fires out tonight.
There's probably
too many of them.
There's going to be like 10 people holding a book being like, I don't know what you're saying, but this book says you're wrong. I don't care about your real
Don't
world
steal my
data.
thunder from next week, Tanner.
that's okay. We get the 9-10 net promoter scores from the customers, and we come and see their customers and make them look bad.
Ultimately, it's all about solving things for customers that they care about. If that is first, the technical is a requirement to do that, but it totally shifts how you approach projects. It's a very different way of looking at it. So the technical, I mean, hopefully it's obvious here. You know, we give a damn about the technical. We've figured all kinds of weird crap out. So anyway, we finished this, and Adam is Orthodox, so lots of cooking at home, and more bathing than a lot of other cultures as well. So even with the bath fan, it wasn't keeping up. So we noticed early on that his humidity was running like above 60%. And this is like October when it shouldn't be running that high. And what's going on? This is terrible. You should have thought of this. But we also didn't know that was probably happening before. He just didn't have a monitor. The monitor was the Ecobee. That's how we figured that out. So it might have been a problem before, he just didn't know. And this isn't his house, by the way. This is just another photo that I took. So this is where often
it was his. I mean, it probably was a bigger problem before because of the bath fan to outdoors.
Well, maybe it was so freaking leaky. That house is leaky. So who knows? But we there's no way to know. It's a counterfactual. We didn't have data on it. So anyway, high humidity. This is where we learned that offer and decline can be really, really useful. So if you want to responsibly avoid responsibility, you want to do offer and decline. By the way, our rule for this is if you aren't getting paid and have control over outcomes, don't take responsibility. So it may not bite you every time, but it's going to get you sometime. Like if you're not getting paid, you don't have control. That's a problem. So in improvement package 2, this was actually a tack on because I did this with a spreadsheet in addition to what you're seeing in the output here. We had ventilation for adding a kitchen fan. It needed a range hood. So this hit the cutting floor because the budget was 20 grand. We needed more money to do the range hood. We couldn't do it. Not in that budget. And then in improvement package 3, Jeff, you asked, look at this plan, August 4th of 2014, ventilating dehumidifier, or we didn't know any better, ERV. See, we FAFO, and we learned we don't want ERVs. They drove us crazy when we started monitoring.
That mistake and its learning came later.
That was next year with Paul Schultz's house, the one where we figured out reheat. And there were a couple of other ones where it was problematic as well. So anyway, we had offered a range hood and a ventilating dehumidifier. And as soon as we pointed that out, Adam cooled down. Oh, okay. We did think of that. You just didn't give us enough money to go do it. So he bought a $250 dehumidifier, put it in his basement, and he was okay. So the offer and decline worked in that case. But I have to say, when that happened, I freaked out. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to have to go fix this. Like after giving all of my money back, after taking his freaking mirror off and finding out that my insurance wouldn't cover that. And you know, the other thing that I did is when I popped that fuse, I had to pay $100 for a service tech, which is a hell of a deal, to come out and be like, yeah, you wired this wrong, dumbass. And he goes and fixes it and gets the thing working, replaces the fuse, and he's out of there in like 10 minutes. And I feel like an idiot. It's not my area of expertise.
Here's your sign.
I wore it proudly. It only cost $100 to undo that. So I got to pay to work on that job. And as far as responsibly avoiding responsibility, offering equipment options is a really good way to do this. So that's one thing that we talk about. And here's Adam's review. This was, he gave me other stuff afterwards, but you can see that he wrote a pretty long review about it. So anyway, Adam was pretty damned happy.
A lot of our reviews are really long like this.
Yep. Long, meaty reviews mean you made the customer happy, and referrals and repeat work happen from this. And particularly if you sell HVAC, people didn't know what the hell to do with what I did. It's just so weird and specialized. But man, in HVAC, this will get you the next job.
Well, particularly when you really involve the client with things to where they actually understand what's going on, they actually have something to talk about. To where now, for a regular HVAC company, even just a basic service call, if you ask them, hey, do you mind leaving a review? What are they going to say? Oh, they were quick to get out here. They fixed it. Like, there's nothing else for them to say. When you actually involve the client in something that's in depth like this, they understand what's going on. They're the one making the decision. Then they actually have you've now made a story for them. And so this story that you've created with them gives them material to write the review. It gives it material for like types of referrals from something like this is going to be a far greater impact than someone that goes, oh yeah, you should use ABC heating and air. They worked on my unit and it worked great. That's the same review that everyone's heard a billion times. Like, that means nothing. But when you have a review like this of, oh, we had problems X, Y, and Z. Here's what we found. Here's what we decided. We looked at a bunch of different options. We chose this. We met our goals, and now we're happy. They're going, oh, wow. So they seems like they're really in depth and they really know what they're doing. That's what you're going to get. But if you just go in and, tell the customer, shut up, listen to me, and pick this option because I know more than you, you eliminate the possibility for this, and you just hold the responsibility bag and say, all right, fill it up.
Yep. You just irresponsibly took responsibility, which can get you in a lot of trouble.
Wear that hero cape.
Yep. No capes. No capes.
Hope that ego stroke was worth it.
For some people, it is.
I'll tell you what, my ego came out of this job pretty damn bruised. I'm glad it worked in the end, because doing the work itself is pretty freaking miserable.
So Nate, I think you evolved the process we have now from mistakes like this.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think this project would be different if you had our processes today?
My scopes would have been a hell of a lot better, so I wouldn't have fought the crew as much.
Okay.
It is challenging. Finding crews that you like to work with is just hard. So I went through 4 companies before I found one that I was okay with. And actually, same on the HVAC side. That part's just hard, but at least you're doing HVAC, so at least you can fix your own stuff. But on the shell side, it's hard finding guys that care a lot and are willing to learn. So I happened to find a small company where the owner is literally an engineer. So he's everybody's like nightmare client, but Gary is freaking awesome because he'd catch my misses too, which was nice. But yeah, the first job that you do shell on is going to be kind of interesting, but we can at least help scope, because that was a bunch of stuff that I missed. There were a bunch of little details that I didn't put in the scope.
You mean you don't just go buy an insulation machine and hope that it works? Or you throw an HVAC installer
you buy
in
an
a crawl
insulation
space?
machine and you leave it in the back lot unused.
Oh, yeah, that's what you do. It sounds like a great resource, guys. That's what we should
Right
do.
next to the blower door.
Tax write-off, money laundering. There's a lot of things you can do with it.
Yeah, that is challenging, but it's mainly a little better process and understanding, and being able to read about some case studies and other people doing stuff. Like you can avoid a lot of the worst things that I did here. And also, don't back the client car into shit.
That helps a little bit.
Just don't move their car.
They
Which
were out
also-
of town. I had to move it to. We were drill and filling like 3 feet away. I had to move the car, but I didn't have to move it all the way to the back of the freaking driveway. Stupid.
Maybe you get somebody with a Tesla next time and they can just summon it.
I had one and I had to move it. And I'm like, oh Jesus. The flashbacks that were happening as I had to move it. Well, we'll go over that one because that was another project that had some pretty significant failures post-project.
The whole key to the story, guys, is don't let Nate drive your car. Don't let Nate drive your car.
I've driven an awful lot of cool stuff, and I wrecked a freaking Civic. I've driven Rolls Royces and Ferraris and Mercedes, and like I've driven all kinds of stuff, millions of dollars worth of cars. And I take the mirror off the freaking Civic.
Something that really speaks to the review is, I mean, how many people could wreck their customer's car and still get a glaring review about how happy they are? I mean, I think most people just be like, if we can just get out of this and then they just forget we exist, that would be great.
Best. And Adam and I are still friends. I mean, I did a DOE webinar and we mentioned this project and I let him know about it. And he joined us on a DOE webinar. Like Adam's awesome. Like it's fun. And I'm a Gentile. He's not supposed to like me. But like it's been fun. So
did he come in just to be like, yeah, he wrecked my car too. It was terrible.
That's how we open the story. If I ever come up, yeah, that's definitely going to have to be what happens. This project was just so painful. Just thinking back on all the details and the stupid stuff I did and had to learn. But it did work out well. And it worked out well because we didn't have this at the time, but figuring out what the goals, house needs, and budget are, this is what we were doing. We just had to put names on it. I mean, so much of what is in all of this is tacit understanding. So it's understanding that lives in one of our heads, but it hasn't been taught and it's not out there. So making the tacit explicit is really important to moving things forward. And like you were talking about earlier, Tanner, like going and measuring stuff, actual stuff in projects, that gives you just huge tacit learning. And we'll get to more of that in a minute, but I do want to touch on this. This meme cracked me up. I don't know if anybody's a Trekkie. I'm not really a Trekkie, but I did really enjoy The Next Generation. I like the philosophy behind it, the dilemmas they put in. But the prime directive of HVAC 2.0 is to provide excellent experiences for both contractors and homeowners. And doing this is done with a very careful setup so that you avoid a whole lot of problems like what I did on this job. So a lot of that is built in. So there's guardrails there that help keep you out of some of these weeds. But I have to say, like the first job that you have spray foamed and you go and you check, you're going to be there for a while and you're going to find crap, which is why I want to be there while the foam is getting sprayed, because every time I've gone and checked afterwards, there's been a big miss. And then it has sucked to fix because the crew is gone and bringing them back is a pretty big lift. So like I would tell clients on this is a 2-day job and there's about 45 minutes that are totally critical that I have to be here or this job probably won't work. I just don't know which 45 minutes. So
the other way you could probably do it is just budget a 2-part kit.
Yeah. Well, and that's what a lot of these ended up taking to fix. So yeah, that's the other thing. You budget in a 200 kit or a 600 kit. But the foam out of them kind of sucks. So I'd much prefer the high pressure, full pro rig foam. And it oftentimes doesn't mix well. So you can get chemical issues. So anyway, that is the story of trying to figure out how the hell do we deliver this for one house. And again, this is going to be less than 1% of projects. And in fact, you can just price yourself out to where you don't even get them if you don't want them, because they are a little bit nerve wracking. And so I was talking about tacit and explicit. I just saw this from Ray Dalio. He's a hell of an investor. He's a very interesting thinker. He's a good guy to follow. And he's now over 70. So he's working on teaching people what he's learned. He's beyond his needing to prove himself, period. So recognize that experience creates internalized learning that book learning can't replace. Everyone here knows stuff and learns stuff that you can't learn in books. And a lot of this is being an autodidact. So, I mean, Brian's done articles on that. Being an autodidact, so much of the stuff we're talking here, you can't learn this stuff. There's nowhere to teach it. Like you just have to go sell the job and go do the job. FAFO, get screwed over on some things, or at least the 2.0 process will help keep you out of a whole lot of these. It won't keep you out of all of them, but it'll help you dodge a lot of the potholes that I found here. But there's a lot of learning that you just can't teach each of these. People are like, you can just do that. Like, okay, go do it. But you got to go sell the job. And this was something that has really struck me. So I don't know if anyone's heard the name W. Edwards Deming, but he's the guy who founded what became the Toyota production system. So this guy's ideas about quality basically kicked American OEM butt, kicked the big three's butt on quality with an American's idea. We just didn't want to take it. But he said a bad system will beat a good person every time. So you can be a one-off person like I was and get yourself out of trouble and do a bunch of things. But if you want to have anybody besides you do any of this work, you need to have a really solid process or they're going to cost you money. If you want to avoid a bunch of callbacks and a bunch of issues, you need a solid process. And this is true for anything. I mean, you need to train people on, how to install a system, right? Same thing with the building performance side. So hopefully I walk through some of the poor judgment, because there definitely were some here, and that led this process and a number of other ones led to creating this. And yes, it's a little bit rigid, but think of it like going bowling and pulling the bumpers up. It helps keep you from gutter balling.
It's training wheels. It's meant to follow this. We have expected results. And when things vary, it's easy to troubleshoot, find out where things went wrong, learn from it. And then once you perfect it, now I understand the reasoning behind each step. Then you can take the training wheels off.
Exactly.
Wax on, wax off. Eventually the movements just become natural. And you can go learn other movements after you get the base moves.
Yeah, then you get to have some real fun. So here's the stuff I learned. Limits of insurance. Yeah, I wasn't covered in the client car. That sucked. Spray foam install details. The low spots really matter. Man-J is way off pretty frequently. It's sorry, popping in here. Father of total quality management. Basically, like Six Sigma, all those things, it all goes back to Deming. He was a hell of a guy. He didn't die that long ago. It was like 95. I think he died. He lived to be almost 100. Anyway, Man-J can be really quite off, particularly for heating. Cooling is not necessarily that bad, but heating is pretty rough. So you need to know what you're doing. In fact, I just double checked the load today and I cut it by a third after a very carefully done load. Because I trued it to energy use. Went from 39 to 29. And it's a client that wants to electrify. 39 and 29 is a big difference. In fact, she's like, should I get a 2-ton or a 3-ton? And I'm like, you can probably do either. It's just like, are you comfortable with a little higher bill in January and February because you're going to run more resistance? She's like, I really want to make sure I keep this house dry. I've had a bunch of moisture problems in it. I'm like, great, you want to do the 2. If you're okay, that's the way to lean.
And that was on an even smaller cooling load. That's not the cooling load that you're talking about. 29, 39.
The heating was 29. The cooling was 16. So that's a challenge. Do you really want to put 36,000 in when cooling 16?
If you want to sell dehumidifiers,
line them up, baby. Line them up. So I hope you got the warehouse stocked. I sucked at project management and work scopes. And super tight homes. Like this house freaking worked. Like it's amazing. This is one of the first times I got to experience the feedback of, I can't believe this is the same house. We fundamentally flipped how that house worked, but you couldn't tell from the outside. It looked the same. Piece rate is a terrible idea for retrofit work. That's just not a good way to structure things. And like my foam guy, Gary, like he'd give me a bid. And sometimes it'd be like, you sure? Like I'd give him a chance and be like, yeah, another 500 because I'm going to use the foam. I want to be able to crawl in there and pull the trigger, and you won't be thinking about it. Give me some extra material to work with because I'm going to use it. And we got to where he was profitable and clients were happy and I was happy, and life was good. It was a fair price. And responsibly avoiding responsibility worked with learning about that high humidity. So there was a lot of stuff on this. I don't think I learned this much from any single job after this, and I hope I never do. I don't need to lose money doing jobs, thanks. Not jobs that take this long.
So you're saying we don't have to aim for net zero?
You can aim for it, miss wide, you're fine. Man, in retrofits, you're just never getting it there. There's actually a great article from one of the principles of Bigmeister, which means master builder in Swedish or Norwegian. They're out in Boston, and they've been known for deep energy retrofits where they actually wrap the outside of a house. And they sold a whole lot of them because Massachusetts would give them $40,000 if they did it. And they're like, they took it away, and we started doing the math. We're like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. We did the math on my old house, and it was going to be at least 70 to do it, and it would save $250 a year. Woohoo! I'd like to retire someday. I'm not spending my money that way.
That's fine if you're going to live in that house for another 150 years.
Well, now one of the things that we're realizing too is we like to drive electric use up.
Yeah, it's kind of an ironic thing, but
It'll accelerate the transition to renewables if we increase demand.
Yep, because most new generation that's being built
So
is
cheap.
renewable. Yeah,
Renewables are the cheapest energy ever mankind has ever seen.
yeah, that's pretty intense. So like electrification is going to happen because math, not because
it's cheap.
sustainability. That it's just going to happen. It's merely a matter of how fast it's going to happen. It's purely a matter of speed.
I mean, these Teslas are dropping in price by $1,000 every 3 weeks. It seems like.
Well, trying to balance supply and demand.
Scaling up supply.
Yeah, they're ramping
Interest rates going up.
Yep, all these things move things around. So I want to leave on look for feedback loops. This is hands down the best way to learn. It's good to understand design and to do design. If you aren't verifying whether your design worked afterwards, both subjectively with client feedback and objectively with measurements, particularly looking at run times and energy use, things like that, in indoor air quality, you're missing out. There's a whole hell of a lot to learn when you do that.
Yeah, this house had to go below design for a long time to even hit high stage.
Yep. Yeah, look at this. At the bottom here, it was minus 11. Design's 5. We were 16 degrees below design. And if you look here, the second one, when it kicked to high stage, he bumped the temperature a degree, which kicked it to high because it had been on low for a while. So this was about a 30,000 BTU load. That's a real thing. So project data is Trump. Field data trumps theory. It just does. This is how you learn. I mean, this is science, for crying out loud. Like, can you replicate the experiment? That's all it is. When you challenge stuff and things move and things change and you learn things. There's too much in building science that's been stuck. So there's a bunch of things that can move. And particularly if we want to see more than a few people get this, the big reason that we aren't doing this anymore is the 10 or 20 projects a year that this could do, this practice. It doesn't matter.
It's 1 in 1,000 houses that you're going to find somebody that has this level of problem that's willing to spend this kind of money because they love the house enough and intend to stay.
Yep.
And then they end up not staying anyway, and it ends up not being a wise financial decision for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, we because of these decisions, Adam probably has to work longer before he retires. That sucks. So that's kind of a bummer. But project data is Trump. This is where you learn things. It's really, really where you learn things. So if I can encourage everyone, look for feedback loops. Like, you don't necessarily want to start with this on client homes. There is all kinds of crap that you don't want to learn. You're going to get clients that you don't want. Don't start there. Please don't start there. There's a lot of risk in starting doing a whole bunch of monitoring for clients. You need to learn what's going on so that you aren't surprised by things, and then learn how to charge for it as well. But energy monitors, the Emporia View, this is $160. This monitors 16 individual circuits plus the 2 mains. It takes like an hour to put in. Anybody who's watching this, contractor,
Offer and document the decline.
yeah, it's a good thing to offer. But put it in your own house and you'll learn stuff. I guarantee you. You'll find weird things. It drove me nuts in our Airbnbs. The twinkle lights burned like 200 watts of string. That's crazy. It's driving me nuts. So I'm like, I got to find some LEDs that I actually like. And I had to go through 3 or 4 different kinds and got to ones. And you know what? The string burns 7 watts. And I used to have timers on them. And now I don't run timers anymore. I just plug them in because it uses 7 watts. It's going to cost me like 75 cents for the month on 24/7. Who gives a damn?
The Emporia definitely saved me on a client who was my mother-in-law.
Oh, now your microphone's doing the thing again.
Oh, son of a gun. And I literally didn't change anything.
It just doesn't like you, Tim.
I don't think it does.
That's better.
But so I put in a Bosch for my mother-in-law and dual fuel for them. And they got like a $600 power bill, and she was not happy. She wanted to shut the Bosch off and go back to mainly focus on gas. Had the Emporia, showed them, hey, this is not the majority of your runtime or your load. Come to find out, my brother-in-law, still living in the basement, got cold and left the space heater plugged up for days on end. So I just showed them, and then they found out, traced it back, shut it off. Bills are back to normal. Everybody's happy.
There's definitely things to find. Like, I'd almost put one of these incognito, like not even let the client know, just put it in. And particularly if you're doing any electrifications, that is the time to put one of these in, because people will blame the change on this. And if you can show them with data that that's not what's going on, that's good. Or, I mean, people are going to get tired of me talking about Carrier, and Carrier certainly hasn't helped me out. Like, the technical
They're
support
such a pain in the ass. Those
nada.
people.
Yeah, they suck as far as their support goes. Just terrible.
And it's been this way for 14 years. We've been recommending their equipment, and they're just assholes.
It sucks. I got a hold of one person at the factory, and the first words out of their mouth is, "How'd you get this number?" I'm like, well, this is good. It was when I was trying to figure out reheat.
Share that with all of us.
Right? Yeah. So, but the products are really good. Like,
some other manufacturer do reheat.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Somebody else, I can fit. Please put it in there. It's a software thing.
Somebody told me they have a train with reheat, but it wasn't working. So we need more than that.
It's talk to Tim Portman. He'll get you set up. He's done that, and I think Raritan has too. Anyway, runtime monitoring. Put in an Ecobee. If you got a regular system in your house, buy an Ecobee and put it in. Okay, just do it, and go watch. You're gonna learn stuff. There you go. You're welcome, Tom. Glad that was helpful.
I have a testimonial too with the energy monitor.
Let's hear it.
So wasn't the Emporia, it was actually the Tesla solar roof. It had the solar shingles, and he had energy monitoring on it. But we just put in these dehumidifiers, and I did a power open damper spring closed. Well, the power button on the thermostat wire, it broke off when one of my installers stripping the wires. It made it weak, and the energy monitor was able to show the dehumidifier run at like 700 watts all the way up to like 1300. And he called me up, John, there's a problem on my dehumidifier. Something happened with the electrical. Came out the next day, saved the dehumidifier, saved the fan without that damper opening up, so it let me know, hey, the dehumidifier is not pumping no air anywhere. It would increase it big time.
You can find various errors. That's for
We
sure.
had a job where the guy turned the dehumidifier on without checking the air filter, and the air filter was stuck in there without having it removed from the plastic.
Yeah, we didn't catch that one though. We caught that one when the dehu died. That was
Well,
not
that
the
that
manufacturer's
prevented my
fault.
dehu from dying. So I mean, it's an amazing that energy monitoring is amazing. It shows you a lot more things than just energy.
Yeah. You just learn a lot. You get a gut feel for a bunch of things that there's no other way to learn. So the other one is air quality monitoring, and like I dug into this early. I mean, Lawrence Berkeley National Labs actually they did their research after me. Mine was half-ass. It's unfunded, and I didn't have a reference instrument, but I was very happy when they came out with the same top finding that I did, which was the FUBOT. But then FUBOT went and they changed to moving out to the commercial market, not the residential. Fundamentally, they needed to be able to control. We were trying to get them to do that. And so like a bunch of my data I don't have access to anymore, which sucks. But the Haven, at least, you can control now. So we've talked about this in the past. So you can do a monitor. The nice thing about these, the Wi-Fi can be a real pain in the butt with the air quality monitors. If the client moves it or unplugs it, or what, or they change Wi-Fi,
They put it in a weird place.
Yeah, if they can see it, they mess with it. This is out of sight, out of mind, doing its thing. So obviously, if they change Wi-Fi, yeah, this has to get reset up. But it's nice that it's out of the way. So at first, I really didn't like the idea of it sampling the entire house instead of one room, but the fact that clients don't mess with it makes me like it quite a bit more. And then now that there's the controller that goes with it, you can do all kinds of things with it. So these are a couple things that I'd recommend putting in your house, and you're going to learn stuff. What are you going to learn? I don't know. When I first started doing the air quality monitoring, I remember somebody be like, so what's your goal in this? Like, I don't know, learn stuff. FAFO. And we learned a lot of stuff, and I realized that we didn't have control over humidity on the vast majority of the projects, and it drove me nuts. And it led to figuring out reheat. Realizing that, okay, we need to run a heat pump only system because otherwise we have to have a separate dehumidifier. Also in watching runtime with things, you realize that we don't really need furnaces on an awful lot of houses. A heat pump's actually the appropriate piece of equipment. Not because green, it's just a furnace is misapplied. It's the wrong piece of equipment for doing the job. So feedback loops, just look for them and do them. It's really, really useful.
It all comes from actually seeing what happens. I mean, it's the equivalent of, people that are gearheads and like to race cars and stuff. I mean, imagine if you were building a car and you went, well, I've calculated exactly what it's supposed to be, and this car is going to run at 8.5 in the quarter mile. I mean, you go to a group of car guys and they're just going to laugh at you. Oh, okay, come to the track and show me you're running that. And the same thing is, imagine going to a track and running your car, but not actually seeing what your time is, and just go, oh yeah, that looked like an 8.5. I think that'll work. It's like this idea is not crazy. It's just, for whatever reason, it's crazy in this one industry of what? Actually watch a house and see what it does? That's insane.
The industry has got the normal of not doing it right is the normal. So when you do stuff out of what they do, it's abnormal to them. Doing it right is kind of abnormal in HVAC. It's crazy.
Well, they want to do slightly better than the shitty second place. It's like if code is the worst legally job you can do for a client, if you can just do slightly better than that, okay, it's great, it's fine. And that's all people think, that they feel like, oh, I did good if I just did slightly better than a crappy job. It's like,
funny,
okay.
Tanner. That's the story of the two guys running from the bear. And one guy stops to tie his shoes. What's going on? I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. I would just as soon not know that the bear exists. That's preferable. You'll be so far ahead of the bear. And you get that by measurement of stuff that's happening in a house
and actually doing it.
Yeah,
actually do it and see what happens. Do you want to actually do good work, or do you just want to do slightly better than second place? And if second place sucks, I mean, are we supposed to feel good about doing slightly better than terrible?
Unfortunately, that's where the free quote HVAC industry is, man. Big box change out, get big quick. Don't give a shit about anybody else,
Oh yeah,
including the client.
mm-hmm.
Definitely
Hey,
not.
as long as you can throw some boxes in, slap some, Remy Halos, add it for a couple extra
High
bucks,
waves.
call it a day.
High
Be like,
waves.
oh yeah,
Watch out. Watch out.
They're
Put a
from
media
space.
filter on the back.
Well, that was the Cape of Learning. May I
The
never
Cape
do a
of
project
Fear.
like that again. Cape of Fear. Yeah. Let's,
Okay.
So I got a question for Johnny, because he dug in and did comprehensive planning process pretty early on when we were introducing this stuff to HVAC guys. Looking back, what are your thoughts about that, Johnny? Do you love that market? Did you dive in because you wanted to be able to do it, and now you're kind of like the idea of maybe not going full on, or what are your thoughts?
So let me just make sure I can repeat it back. So I dove in with I jumped in that cold water into CPPs really quick. And then you're asking me, do I still like that pace, or do I like slowing it down, or seeing if we don't even have to do that? Is that kind of
Yeah.
okay? Well, I think
I mean, you like being able to offer.
somebody's going for that 8.5, Tanner.
They heard you, Tanner.
that's what I'm talking about.
There you go.
That's doing it for Dale. That's what I'm talking
I mean,
about.
it sounded like an 8.5, so it must have been right.
Yeah, they were missing the muffler, man.
That sounded like an 8.5, and I can see air leakage.
I could tell you this. It's a lot of work, and I think I was just wanted to do it because I had so many problems of not really understanding the client and doing code for energy programs. And energy programs were promoting comfort, health, safety, but were allowing us to blow insulation over, insulation over infected insulation with rat poop and rat pee and leakage on a building crazy. So I was trying to figure out, why am I getting blamed for all this stuff that has none of my control? So that's why I jumped into CPP, because I was just like, teach me all. I want to do every single test out there for free. And I started understanding, like, well, we can get paid for this. Y'all are doing about $2,500. The part was, I was selling it. I wasn't allowing the client to want it, to beg me for it, which now you better beg me for it, because this is for serious people with serious problems, and they got the time, because this ain't easy to do a CPP and then create something to help them when their house is a mess or the client's a mess. The client being a mess is psychological sometimes. And really knowing the goals, like, hey, you remember you picked this because you didn't have the budget? Yeah, it's right here. We went over it. Remember, this is what you told me to do. It didn't work out what you wanted. After I gave you the odds of success, you took that 20%. So I've learned from that helped me. I like actually a good path A with understanding goals up front. Path B is allows me to know, is it the house or the HVAC, or is it both? So hopefully that's a good explanation. I'd rather go for B's and A's instead of going down to the C unless it's a really messed up house.
Yep, I should define a pathway. We call it A, B, and C path. A path is free quote. B path is comfort consult. C path is CPP, comprehensive planning process, which is what I just showed a project of.
So, Johnny, you're actually starting to think that maybe you might even be pretty happy doing a good A path.
Yes, I figured out a part of it, which I've been really working on, is still really understanding goals. Maybe not digging the whole interview in path B, but some key things to let me know Why did you want to spend all this money in the attic? Tell me why you asked me for ductwork. Tell me. And then give me a real reason instead of, I just want ductwork, John.
So going back to
tell
your
me.
Sandler.
Going back to Sandler, and still questions to me is the most important thing, like you were saying in this, Nate, really understanding the client. It's powerful.
Yeah, that 20-degree drop in 8 hours, that scarred Adam, man. that drove a large expenditure. It worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, questions are the answer, even if I oftentimes suck at asking questions.
That's the biggest part.
Does the audience have any questions? Because this has gone long.
Yep. Johnny, I'm glad you made it. That's John Esquivel, by the way. Austin
Do we
Star
go
Services.
private? Do you guys want to go over to a Monday meeting on Zoom, or what do you want to do from here?
Let's see what happens, but I will close this up for tonight. So we'll see you.
Thank you, folks, for coming and watching, and see you next week.
Night all.
Good night.